Hey YouTube, if you remember I said I was going to test these blades. This blade, there's the weld mark, and this blade is the one that has the kinks in it. The thing is the blade is very sharp, okay, and it has a very good positive set on it. I know you can't see the set probably in the camera, and I just recently sharpened it, you can tell because of my marks on there. So this plate has 3 little kinks in it. So I just want to run a test on it. I want to know what happens when you're cutting if there are kinks in the blade. Actual little bends that I think occurred because of the force. In other words, you go into the tree with the branch, or with the blade, I'm sorry, with the blade, and it hangs up, and the torque of the motor forces the blade on this side to become loose, and I actually think it kinks it. That's what my theory is. But I'm not going to be able to prove that today. That's not what I'm looking to do today. Today what I'm looking to do is to find out what's the result of those kinks. In other words, when you have a kink in the blade, what happens to your cutting ability? That's what I want to find out. So we're going to put this blade on here, and I'm going to tighten it up to the specs that it's supposed to be, and then we're going to cut a section off the top of this log and see how straight it is. Okay, from all intents and purposes, what I see there with the tensioner is everything is good there. I think I'm going to lower this down a little bit, and maybe you'll be able to get a good view of how well this thing is cutting. I guess it ought to be a little lower than that yet. Let me just lower this camera down more. Hang in there, guys. You'll be alright. I'm not a professional photographer. I don't claim to be one. I don't want to be one. Okay. So, let me get this thing up a little higher here. And that ought to do it, I guess. Maybe a little higher yet. Yeah, right about there. Okay, so we got a blade in there. It's tensioned. That is actually got 3 kinks in it, and we're going to see how it cuts. Hold on. Running the blade a little bit in the rollers just to make sure that it's seated itself properly. It doesn't take much before it's good. So now I'm going to cut this. tell you one thing, that blade is really sharp. That went through there like nothing. You can see how kinked that is. I was only down 1 inch over on the other side, and we're down about 3 inches here. Now you can see that cut, it went through there really easy, and it doesn't seem like those kinks in there affected this cut at all. So I'm going to put a straight edge on there just to check it out. Now if you look at that cut, you notice at the end there, it seems to have cut down a little bit for some reason, a little thinner. It's straight all the way through pretty much. There's a little bit of a wave in it. Right here you can see some light under there. And then here, this is where I stop to adjust the throat. So I've seen this a couple of times in the different cuts I've made. So when you go to adjust the throat, you ought to adjust it wide enough that you're not going to hit anything, you know, right away. I'm talking about this bearing here. You want to adjust this wide enough. I don't think it should be all the way wide, you know, as wide as it can go, but I think it should be wide enough to clear the log easily. So we have a little bit of a dip there, which you can see. It's not really bad, but I think what happens is the blade, as the blade enters the wood, it has a tendency to lift a little bit, and the longer you leave it sit in one spot without moving it, the more it'll wear down into the wood. So, let's see how it looks the other way here. Now you can see there's a little bump there where this knot was. There's a knot here. The knots tend to be harder. You know, it's not bad, but it still is a little bit higher here, okay? Now, I don't know if tensioning the blade tighter would take that out of there or not, but I do know that this groove here comes from not going steadily through the log. It's when you stop that the blade actually moves slightly. I noticed it did it towards the end, and also at the beginning here. For some reason, when you start the cut, the blade lifts itself slightly. This is why I try to go with a 3 inches extra longer board when I start my cut. Now, I don't know if that's normal or not. I've seen it happen a lot of times. Sometimes it's a lot more drastic. So let's try another cut. What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to cut I'm going to turn the log. Let me move back a little bit. I'm going to turn the log now and try another cut and see if that one's any better. Stay here. Okay, now at this end, you can see again the blade had gone down into the wood a little bit harder. Fairly straight. I mean, that light that's coming through there may look pronounced to you, but it's, yeah, I don't know, you're talking about maybe a 1/16 or not even an 1/8 of an inch quite. So it's fairly straight. There's no dip in there from where I stopped because I didn't stop this time. Now at this end here, let's see what we got here. We have again where the blade entered in and rose up a little bit, and then you can see there's one plane right here, and then it sort of loses that. It goes, the blade goes down a little, so it appears as if the blade is sort of wandering. It's not that bad, I mean, but it's bad enough. I mean, this high spot right here, this is a high spot here, I would say, oh, I don't know, it's holding the blade up on each end if it wasn't for this high spot. So the blade's not coming through there as straight as I'd like it to. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this blade back to another blade that doesn't have kinks in it, and we'll see what it does on one of the other cuts. Okay, YouTube, so this is a brand new blade from the factory. You can tell by the wire that's on it there. Never been used. Just took it out of the box. So we're going to take that blade off that had the kinks in it. And we're going to make a new cut with that blade and see how that actually does. Now keep in mind, guys, I'm not trying to test the factory blade. What I'm trying to do here is test what happens when you have a blade that has kinks in it, a used kinked blade, compared to a new blade. So this is a new blade in here. I'm going to run it a little to make sure it's tracking good. And then we're going to make another cut and see what kind of a cut it makes. Okay, so the tension is good on that. We're going to run that a little bit. I'm going to go get a better straight edge than that T-square. I have a nice 6-foot straight edge. I'll be right back. Okay, so I got this 72-inch straight edge. It doesn't have a T on the other end, so that'll be a lot easier to lay it on the bump. I got the bump below. take that down another inch just to see if I have the full log, but I'll check that first. Setting these on here so they hold up the straight edge. So let's look at what we got here. Now if you look there, you can see some light there, but it's a much thinner wave here. It is wavy, even with the brand new blade, but it's not more than like a 32nd to a 16th off. Okay? Let me see what happened at the end here. Now this did not lower down, well, maybe a hair. No, not really when you look at it. But it does have a high spot right in here. Now that's a brand new blade. And if you think about it, I mean, you're not, this means that this Woodmizer that I have is cutting within 1/16 of an inch here. Alright, if you look at this really close, you're not looking at more than a 1/16. So it cuts within a 1/16 of an inch, which is good because that's what the guide on it is about, a 1/16. The teeth on the adjustment wheel over there. So we entered the log with a better cut. It wasn't as near as far off as it was with that angled cut. Or I mean with the blade. Yeah, let me start over here. We entered this log with a lesser deviation in, you know, how much the blade rose up. You can see that it did rise up though, and I think they always do. So it came up to a degree, not much, like I say, within a 1/16. That's even tighter in this area than a 1/16. But it cut a lot straighter with less variation in the cuts. And I know from doing this that if you hit spots where there was a branch at one time like that knot, this knot, and there's a knot here, the knot wood is harder than the other wood, and it does make the blade rise up slightly. Now I don't know, you know, for something like this, I tell you can't tell with the naked eye, because looking at it, even if I look across it here, yeah, that thing looks straight. I mean, see what I'm saying there? It looks nice and straight. So a 1/16 of an inch is not a big deal. In fact, if you look at lumber that you buy, you know, wood is wood. It can move, it swells, it shrinks, it does all kinds of stuff. And I don't know what's happening with this log as it sits here. I mean, the sun's beating on it. It could be pulling moisture out of this on this side, causing the log to do all kinds of stuff. But it's not major. It's not major changes. So I would say that the blade, the more perfect to a new blade you have, the better off naturally you're going to be. And that only makes sense. The thing here with the blade that has kinks in it, it appears to get a lot more waviness. But I can say that I believe that the blade that I sharpened is equally as sharp as the blade that I'm cutting with now, because of the speed that I can go through the log with. It doesn't slow down, it just wants to keep going. So, and that's sort of what guides me as to how fast I go through a log. If it seems like it's an easy cut, I just keep going. I'm going to turn this and make one more cut with this new blade and see what happens. I'd like to explain something else too before I go getting started here. The Woodmizer has teeth on the gauge that moves the head up and down. Those teeth are graduated in a 1/16 of an inch. Now, I know a lot of people out there who've never gotten the theory of measurements or never taken a course in surveying or something believe that if something's 36 inches, it's 36 inches, period. But that's not true, because something can be, you know, like my garage is 24 feet wide. If I measure that with a foot rule, and I'm at, or I mean a tape measure, and I'm at 24 foot, that's fine. But really, when you start measuring to the nearest 16th or the nearest 32nd, you tend to be off. So with Woodmizer designing the saw to be a 1/16 of an inch increments that you can move it, with this cut that I just made falls in those guidelines. It falls within that. Now, if the teeth on this saw were made to cut a 32nd of an inch, then I would say that the saw can't keep up with what, you know, the measuring device that they use to move the head up and down. But it is staying within the range that they claim, and that's a good thing. But that's not what we're after. We're after to see the difference in the blade. So let me turn this one more time. And if you notice, the log's not rocking back and forth. I mean, if I push it hard enough, naturally, because it's wood, but it's not rocking. So that also means that you got a nice flat cut. Guys, when it comes to cutting wood, you should look close, but you shouldn't be looking for perfection. And I'm not trying to give excuses for the sawmill, because that's not what I'm after. What I'm after is, go look at any lumber. I mean, you can find lumber with all kind of problems in it. It's thick, it's thin. I mean, usually 2x4s are fairly close to a certain thing, a measurement, but they're not perfect, and I've seen them, and anybody who's out there that's a carpenter knows what I'm talking about. Now by eye, I'll tell you, that looks beautiful, that cut. But we're going to check it with the straight edge. Now there's two things here that are different than the last cut I made. One is there's no knots on this side, so there was no branches to contend with or no hard wood. If you look at this, again the blade rose up very slightly, but actually hardly nothing. You can just see a couple teeth marks getting started there. And all along, I mean, you can see a little bit of a light, but you're less than a 16th. You're at a 32nd there. So this blade and the saw is cutting a nice straight line. It's like I say though, when you have knots in the wood, the knots are harder and the knots tend to make the blade rise up slightly. Let's just check this end of the log now. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, we've got a nice cut here. Okay. You know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to take, now we know we have a nice straight cut from a brand new blade. Let's try putting the wavy, or the dented blade, the bent blade, the kinked blade back on and see what happens here with this space, since there's no knots over here. You know, I hate doing this to a perfectly good piece of red oak, but somebody's got to do it, and I like knowing things, so we're going to find out what happens here. Okay guys, so I got that new blade out of there, and this is the blade that has the kinks in. You can see one of the marks there. Okay, so we're going to try this now. Okay, so this is the blade that has a couple kinks in it. It really didn't cut that bad, but you can see that the areas that are problems, like where the knots are, when you first start to cut, this kink blade is giving me more pronounced problems than what the new blade did. The new blade still, at the beginning of the cut, rose up slightly, okay? And the other blade, and at the knots, it also rose up slightly, but not more than that 16th that is what the specs are for the machine, which I'm okay with that. That's not an issue. But I want to cut this board here that doesn't have any knots on it, on this side, just to see what happens. You can tell by the speed that I'm going through here with that my blade that has the kink on it is sharp. Okay? I'm going to check and see how good that cut. Now let's take a look at this. Now you can see a little bit of light here and there. Amazingly, it's not more than a 1/16 of an inch there. However, over at the end here, this is much more pronounced. I've probably got a 1/4 of an inch difference at this edge. Now, what that's telling me is, for some reason, the blade is rising up. Now, the blade's against these rollers, and you have to wonder, why does it rise up? Does it kink somehow when it's cutting? I don't know for sure. Apparently when you, let's face it, when you take something that's straight, like a piece of metal, and you push it, you put a weight against one edge, it does pull in other places and causes the teeth to rise up. So in other words, when you put pressure that way, the teeth will rise up. Okay, that's just the nature of the metal. But this one is doing a lot more of it than what the new blade did. Let's check the bottom end of this log here now. But again, I've always had that sort of problem. It hasn't been as bad as that 1/4 of an inch up there, but I do make sure I use a 3-inch longer log when I'm cutting. Yeah, I have some little bit of waviness here, but maybe right there, that might be an 1/8 of an inch there. Okay, so this does have a little more pronounced waviness on it. So I don't think it's the sharpness of the teeth, because I think that is a good thing on my blade that I sharpened. I think it's good. I don't think it's less than what the factory edge is. However, you know, they do have machinery, and it's more stays within tolerance than a hand file. But here's the other thing. If you notice on here, there's some lines on this, and there's some marks in the wood. And you know, if you close your eyes, you can't even feel that, but it's just a little bit of a mark. Now, here's what I will tell you. Compared to the new blade, now the new blade has some marks. I don't know if you can see those little lines in there, but again, you can't feel that. The only thing that I think is the difference with that is, when I sharpened my blade, because it had that kink in it, I could have gave it a little bit of an extra set, so it might be more like a 30/1000 of an inch set on the teeth, rather than what this is usually 25/1000 from the factory, I believe. I have to measure them, but I think that's what it is. So even with this bent blade, you can see the difference though. It does make a difference, and the more dull the blade becomes, I think the more pronounced this problem would be. So, you know, sharpening or having a good sharp blade and recognizing whether the blade has these bumps in or not. So I'm going to say that, and you can argue with me if you want to on comments, maybe we can talk about it. When I say argue, I'm talking on an intellectual level, not like I'm mad at you. What I'm saying is here, I'm believing that a blade that has the bends in it, that was stuck in a problem with a nail, maybe should be watched, so that when you cut with it, you know, like maybe it'd be best to use it to just skin the log. Of course, that's, you know, a lot of trouble and hassle to change the blade, but hey, if you're wanting, you know, maybe that's what you want to do. But anyway, what I'm saying is, I think that the blade with the kink in it obviously shows a harder amount of problems. In other words, it adds to the kink, it adds to the bevel, it adds to the bumps, the rises and dips slightly. This is not a bad board. I can run this board through my planer and not have a problem with it, okay? As long as I have a full 1-inch board to start off with. Now this edge doesn't help me matter. This being off a 1/4 of an inch I don't like, you know, because that actually makes it harder to deal with. But yeah, I think it's pretty good. Good example of how not having a good straight blade in this makes a variation in the wood. And like I say, as this used blade gets duller and duller, it's going to show that more and more, I believe. Guys, let me know what you think about what I've done here. If you have any comments, leave them in the comments below. I find this amazing and very interesting. The part that I'm a little leery of here is this rising up of the teeth, you know? I mean, the thing is it's on this flat roller here, so you would think that the tension and everything, but I mean, it can give. I can make that give by hand there. So, amazing. Alright guys, have a good one. It's a bright sunny day in Pennsylvania today. It's warm out, that's why I'm not wearing my shirt or my coat. What we got over here on the trusty old thermometer? 64 out today. Unbelievable. It's supposed to go down and snow over the weekend coming up. Got 84. I don't know if you can see it there. 84 in the kiln. And the good thing is, for as wet as everything is, the relative humidity in there is only about 40. It's amazing. Okay. Let me know if you want to try any other kind of things with this to see how things change. But I would say that wavy blade should be scrapped because it's not doing what it ought to do. Although you might, I'll tell you where it would come in handy. If you're a person that wants to change blades because you want to, you know, not be spending money on extra blades, after you make all the flitches, if you turn them on edge and you just want to cut the bark off one side, I would say that blade would be good for something like that. But you got to watch it because you do need a straight edge, especially if you cut a straight edge for, you know, if you cut a straight edge for anybody, whether it be a carpenter or a furniture maker, when you cut the flitch and you make a straight edge, they expect that edge to be straight. If it's not straight and they throw it in a saw, it's going to give them some bad cuts. Talk to you later. Alright guys, one of the other things I noticed here, now I cut, there's 4 boards cut off of this log, and what I want to show you is this. This is the other thing we're looking at. If you look at this where the cut is, you can see that there's light on both sides of that, and this moves a little bit. Now, I think you're looking at about 1/8 of an inch on both sides. And this is the blade that had the kinks in it. You can see that it's all the way through the entire log. Through the entire cut I'm having that. And amazingly, except for right in the beginning. Okay, see how straight that is right there? So, obviously that blade, as soon as it starts cutting into the wood, the blade is sort of bending up a little bit, I believe. That's why you're getting this kerf that I'm getting. And as it enters and comes out of the wood, it's being held closer by the guides, the roller guides, to where it should be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that old blade off and put a new blade on and see if that makes a difference in that. Alright guys, so that's the new blade on there, and we're checking for the side, we're checking for the flatness of the side to side cut. Hey YouTube, I got a little sidetracked right after I made that cut on the log I had up. I just wanted to show you that these boards now with the new blade have no rocking to them. Okay, they're nice and flat. So that's just one of them. The rest of them I put in the kiln already. What I want to get at is that the blade that's been stretched, I'm going to do a little demonstration then. I'm going to do it in my garage of what happens to metal when it gets a kink put in it. So then you'll understand, you know, what's happening with the blades, because that's what I'm trying to understand. And I'm going to take that kinked blade and I'm just going to I mean, I could try heating it and hammering it and shrinking it because I have a shrinker, but I don't know if it'll work with spring steel. And, you know, a lot of people say, what's the use? Their blades are 20 bucks. I don't even think they're 20. I think they're 16. I'm not sure. Maybe 20, but let's say 20. The whole point of doing things and knowing how to do stuff is to not throw things away. Okay, that's the whole point. But anyway, it's obvious that a new blade gives you a flatter cut, a straighter cut across the grain than a blade that's been kinked. Now, that's something you would think that common sense would tell you that, but common sense doesn't always tell you that. I mean, sometimes you need to test something out, and that's what I was after today. So guys, thanks for watching, and I will show a demonstration about what happens to steel when it gets a kink in it. Guys, I'm going to use this little piece of metal here, this is a piece of steel, as a little demonstration as to what happens with steel that gets bent or kinked. You see how it's against my workbench there all the way along? Okay, it's straight. So what happens is, if it gets kinked, so let me just see how I can do this. If you kink this, okay, like that, I have it kinked. And what I want you to say, I'm going to leave it kinked like this. And if you put the same piece of metal against the workbench, you can see the ends of it are away from the bench. See this end here? I don't know if you can see that. Right there, it's away. And it's also away at that end. So what happens is, when you bend or put a kink in metal, now this is dramatic compared to what we've been looking at, but when you put a kink in metal, it tends to bend on a curve, because what's happening, you've kinked it, and that means you've stretched it. So I have a stretcher here, that's what this is, and even though you can take this metal that I have and sort of straighten it out, just put it against something that's straight, you can see that even when you try to straighten it out now, it still has these bends to it. So if I put this in a stretcher and I stretch this metal, you can see, you know, dramatically what's happening there. So any kind of stretching, I can also shrink it at the same time here. Let me get into my shrinker. I want to shrink the opposite end. So if you shrink then metal, you can see what will happen here. See how that's got a curve the opposite way? So stretching one side makes it move this way, shrinking it makes it move the opposite way. So what we're after here is just trying to find out about the blades. So the alignment with everything over there has to be straight. But once, you know, and Woodmizer has done a good job with that. But once you put a blade through a saw curve, and the wood does what that wood just did, like pulls over, and it puts a kink in the wood. Now that's not what happened to the other blade, but this has happened to me with a lot of 1x that I stand vertically in the saw and try to cut. Once you put a kink in that blade, you can't get that kink out of there. I mean, you can if you put it on the shrinker stretcher and really work at it, but spring steel's a bugger. Once it gets a kink in it, it doesn't want to change. So I'm just trying to show you here what actually can happen to it, and I think that that's what's happened to that blade. And that stretching also, if you leave tension on the blade, I believe it does the same thing, but on a smaller scale. I hope you enjoyed these videos, this little set that I put together here. If you have any comments, again, please write them in there. I love answering the comments, as long as they're, you know, within reason of what the subject's about. Thanks, guys.